Hello, my friends, and welcome to TalkFreak, where English becomes exciting and every story helps you grow. Today, we begin a long and fascinating journey through the history of the United States of America, a story of discovery, struggle, freedom, and dreams. By listening to this lesson, you will not only improve your English listening and speaking skills, but also understand how America became what it is today, a land of opportunity, diversity, and innovation. Let's begin our journey through time. Let's discover how the story of America began. Part 1. The First Americans. Long before there was a country called the United States, thousands of years before Columbus, there were people already living here. Historians believe that around 15,000 years ago, groups of people from Asia crossed a frozen land bridge called Beringia, connecting Siberia and Alaska. These early settlers were the Native Americans, the first people to call this land their home. They lived in harmony with nature, hunting animals, fishing, and growing crops like corn and beans. They built villages, traded goods, and formed rich cultures and languages. From the Navajo in the deserts, to the Iroquois in the forests, to the Sioux on the Great Plains, Native American life was diverse, spiritual, and deeply connected to the earth. Their story is the true beginning of America. Part 2. The Age of Discovery, 1492 and beyond. Fast forward to the year 1492. Europe was entering the age of exploration. Kings and queens sent explorers to find new trade routes and riches. One of them was Christopher Columbus, an Italian sailor supported by the Spanish monarchs, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Columbus hoped to reach Asia by sailing west, but instead he arrived in the Americas. He didn't know it yet, but he had discovered a new world. Although the Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, had reached North America nearly 500 years earlier, Columbus's voyage in 1492 changed history. It connected Europe and the Americas permanently. Soon, explorers from Spain, France, England, and Portugal began arriving, claiming land, spreading religion, and searching for gold. But this age of discovery also brought disease, conquest, and suffering to the native peoples. Entire tribes were wiped out by illness and war. It was the beginning of a new and painful chapter in America's history. Part 3. The First Colonies. In 1607, England established its first permanent colony in Jamestown, Virginia. Life was harsh. Cold winters, hunger, and disease killed many settlers. But those who survived laid the foundation for English America. In 1620, another group known as the Pilgrims sailed on a ship called the Mayflower. They came seeking religious freedom, not gold. They landed in present-day Massachusetts and built a community called Plymouth Colony. With help from Native Americans like Squanto, they learned how to plant corn, fish, and survive. To celebrate their first successful harvest, they held a feast, what we now call Thanksgiving. By the early 1700s, there were 13 colonies along the eastern coast. These colonies were divided into 3 regions. New England colonies, small farms, fishing, shipbuilding. Middle colonies, rich soil, diverse people, many religions. Southern colonies, large plantations growing tobacco, rice, and cotton. But the South depended heavily on enslaved Africans brought by force across the Atlantic, a dark part of the nation's story. Part 4. The Road to Independence. Although the colonists lived in America, they were still ruled by the King of England, George III. The king made laws and demanded taxes, but the colonists had no representation in Parliament. They protested, "No taxation without representation." Tension grew. In 1773, angry colonists dressed as Native Americans and dumped British tea into Boston Harbor, an event known as the Boston Tea Party. Soon, rebellion turned into war. The American Revolution, 1775-1783. Brave leaders like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson guided the people toward freedom. In 1776, Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, a document that said all men have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. After years of struggle and help from France, the Americans won the final battle at Yorktown, Virginia, in 1781. 2 years later, Britain recognized the United States of America as an independent nation. Freedom had been won, but the journey was just beginning. Part 5. Building a New Nation. The new country needed rules, so in 1787, leaders wrote the U.S. Constitution, a document that still guides the nation today. It created a government based on democracy and freedom with 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, to keep power balanced. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. He set an example of honesty, courage, and service. However, freedom was not for everyone. Women, enslaved people, and Native Americans were still denied basic rights. The promise of equality would take generations to fulfill. Part 6. Expansion and the Rise of Slavery. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase, buying a massive area of land from France, doubling the nation's size. Explorers Lewis and Clark, with the Native American guide Sacagawea, journeyed west, mapping rivers, mountains, and meeting native tribes. But as settlers moved west, Native Americans were forced off their lands. Entire communities were displaced. One tragic example was the Trail of Tears, where thousands died during forced relocation. Meanwhile, in the South, the economy grew on slave labor. Plantations produced cotton, tobacco, and sugar, but at a terrible human cost. Millions of Africans were enslaved, treated as property, and stripped of their freedom. This injustice would divide the nation. Part 7. The Civil War, 1861-1865. By the mid-1800s, tension between the North and South reached a breaking point. The North wanted to end slavery. The South wanted to protect it. In 1861, the Southern states left the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The war had begun. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, believed the nation must stay united. He also believed that slavery must end. In 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that enslaved people in Confederate states were free. The war was long and bloody. Brother fought against brother. But in 1865, the Union won, slavery was abolished, and America began the hard process of healing. Part 8. Reconstruction and the Industrial Revolution. After the Civil War, America entered a time called Reconstruction. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments gave freedom, citizenship, and voting rights to African Americans. But equality was not real yet. Many Southern states passed Jim Crow laws to keep black and white people separate. At the same time, the nation grew rapidly. Factories, railroads, and cities transformed the economy. Inventions like the telephone, the light bulb, and electricity changed daily life. Immigrants from Europe and Asia arrived by the millions, seeking a better life, the American dream. They built railroads, worked in factories, and helped shape modern America. Part 9. The Rise of a Global Power. By the early 1900s, America had become a rising global power. After the Spanish-American War, 1898, it gained territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. During World War I, 1914-1918, the U.S. helped bring victory to the Allies. The 1920s, known as the Roaring Twenties, were full of jazz, progress, and hope. Women gained the right to vote, and cities expanded rapidly. But in 1929, the Great Depression struck. Banks failed, millions lost jobs, and poverty spread. President Franklin D. Roosevelt launched the New Deal, a plan that created jobs, supported farmers, and gave the nation hope again. Part 10: World War II and the Cold War. In 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The next day, America entered World War II. Factories built weapons instead of cars, and women like Rosie the Riveter worked in industries for the first time. The war ended in 1945, after Germany surrendered and the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the war, America became a superpower, but a new tension began: the Cold War with the Soviet Union. It was a battle of ideas, democracy versus communism, fought through technology, influence, and the space race. In 1969, American astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, saying, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Part 11: The Civil Rights Era and Modern Times. At home, America faced another fight for civil rights. African Americans demanded equality after centuries of injustice. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X inspired millions to stand up peacefully for justice. The Civil Rights Act, 1964, and Voting Rights Act, 1965, ended segregation and gave new hope for equality. In the decades that followed, America faced challenges: the Vietnam War, economic recessions, and political divides, but continued to grow stronger. Part 12: America, Today and the Future. Today, the United States remains one of the most powerful nations in the world. It leads in technology, education, and innovation, with global companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Tesla. American culture, movies, music, food, and fashion influences people everywhere. But America still faces problems. Inequality between rich and poor, racism, and political division climbs up our climate change and global responsibility. Yet, America's strength is its diversity. People from every continent live here, bringing their traditions, foods, and languages. Together, they make America a place of endless creativity and possibility. Conclusion: the spirit of America. The history of the USA is not just about wars and presidents. It's a story of ordinary people, immigrants, dreamers, workers, and fighters, who built a nation of freedom and opportunity. America is far from perfect, but its story reminds us that even in hard times, hope, courage, and unity can change the world. From the native tribes to the space age, from slavery to civil rights, from the colonies to global leadership, the journey of America continues. Because as long as people believe in freedom and dreams, the story of America will never end. Thank you for listening to TalkFreak. If you enjoyed this English listening practice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that help you learn English through real history.